Math 3, we're still in Unit 10. Today we're just going to be learning how to fill in the radian part of our unit circle. So we already learned previously how to do our degrees and how to do each of these ordered pairs. And if you forgot, there's another video on that and we can go back through it. For radians, we're going to have to think about this a couple different ways. When we're doing our radians, the first thing I like to start with is our 45-degree marks, okay? Because those are a little bit different than our other markings will end up being. But so at 0, it's obviously 0 radians. Also, we learned that at this point, it's how many radians? 2 pi radians, right? Okay, and we have 2 pi radians over here. I'm going to use a different color pen here. Hold on. Okay, so we have 2 pi radians over here, which means at our 180 mark, it's how many? 1 pi. Good. And then up at our 90-degree mark, we know that it's how much? Pi over 2. So it's like each quarter is a half a pi. Would we all agree with that? And so down here would be what? It's going to be 1.5 pi, right? And so that 1.5 pi would actually be 3 pi over 2. Okay, and so it's like 0 pi, pi over 2, or 1/2 pi, a pi, and then 3 pi over 2. And you could even think of this as like 4 pi over 2, because that would reduce. Okay, now for the 45, what is going to be halfway in between 0 and pi over 2? What would you do to get that halfway mark? Pi over 4 is correct. How you would get it though, just so you know, is if you have pi over 2 and you're taking half of it, you're going to multiply it by a half and you end up getting pi over 4. We okay with that? Okay. So that's at the 45-degree mark. That is pi over 4. Now, what ends up happening is, okay, so if I end up changing these for just a minute, I'm going to write this one here for just a minute as 8 pi over 4, okay? If you go through and count for the 45 degrees, every 45, this would be 145, this would be 2, you guys with me? And then you have here, this would be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Do you guys see that? And so that means that we don't have to think too much as long as we remember that this is 4. This is going to be 1 pi over 4. This is actually 2 pi over 4. And does that reduce to pi over 2? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which means this 45 right here is going to be 3 pi over 4. This one would be 4 pi over 4, which we know would reduce to just 1 pi. Here, this is going to be down here at the bottom now. This 45 is going to be, good, 5 pi over 4. This one is 6 pi over 4 at your 270, but it reduces to be 3 pi over 2, right? But this one is 6. This one now will be 7 pi over 4. And then this over here is 8 pi over 4, which reduces to 2 pi. Okay? Are we all okay with that? Okay, so it's like your 45s are separate from your 30s, okay? If you count in the circle, okay, so you have 30, and then you add another 30 and you get to 60, right? And then you add another 30 and you get to 90. Are you with me? So if we count kind of how we did with our 45s, you would have 1, okay, 2, 3 at the 90, okay? And then you'd have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Do you guys agree with that? Yeah? Very good. It's like a clock. And because when you add, you have 30, you add another 30, you get 60, you add another 30, you get 90. You with me on all this? Okay, so what ends up happening here, and if we wanted to, you know, because we learned last time that we could always do, if I wanted to change 30 degrees into radians, what do I multiply by? Pi over 180. Good. And so what's going to end up happening here? Okay, and so we end up with pi over, you guys don't know? Okay, it's 6. Shortcut, if you ever forget, is that you have zeros, and so I can cancel out the zeros, and then 3 and 18, we can reduce those. Okay, it's pi over 6. So when we counted, there were 12, correct? But of those 12, they end up becoming 2 pi. Are you with me? And so we are going to label this, and we know this is to be true, as pi over 6, or 1 pi over 6. When you get to the 60, we're going to add a 6 to it, and so at the 60, it's going to be 2 pi over 6, which you could reduce to pi over 3, okay? This one, when we get here, is 3 pi over 6. And I'm just going to write it here for a minute. 3 pi over 6. Does that end up reducing to pi over 2?
Yes.
Yeah, because these cancel out, you have pi over 2. Okay, we go to the next one. This is going to be what?
4 pi over 6.
Good. 4 pi over 6. And what I might suggest doing is going through and writing all of them and then going back and reducing when you can. Okay, so you don't get messed up. So this one's 4 pi over 6, which means here is going to be 5 pi over 6. And then at the pi, it's 6 pi over 6, which just reduces to 1 pi. Then we get 7 pi over 6. And then 8 pi over 6. This is going to be 9 pi over 6, which would reduce to that. And then we get 10 pi over 6. And then 11 pi over 6. And then we get 12 pi over 6, which we know reduces to be 2 pi. And so then I would just go back through. And so up here, you know, this 4 pi over 6, we should end up reducing that to be 2 pi over 3. And then let's see here, this 8 pi over 6, this should end up reducing to be 4 pi over 3. And then 10 pi over 6 would be 5 pi over 3. And that is it. And I guess the 2 pi actually should have been down here, and this should have been 0. Sorry. Okay. Any questions on that?